Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lighthouse Sessions. I'm excited. I have my friend Karen Ross with me. Karen, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure, I'd be happy to just jump in and let people know that. I am a performance mindset expert. I use a number of different tools in helping people perform the way they really want to perform. I work with people who are already performing at a peak level, but just have some interruptions, if you will, some obstacles that they encounter on occasion that takes them into a mindset that doesn't serve them. So I work with the mindset, I work with the conscious and the subconscious mind, and help people develop their own tools so that they can reverse those negative impacts in their life.
I love it. Now, let's talk about what is showing up for people when they need your help, because I think understanding the symptom is a good start to the conversation.
Well, I work a lot with athletes, very high performing athletes, and the same concepts that we use there apply to executives, entrepreneurs, people in the arts, performing arts, and just about any category where someone is performing in some manner. And what I'll kind of focus a little bit on athletes because they give such a good example. They are peak performers. Some of them are leaders of their team. If they're in college, they may be the team captain. And it's because they're so talented, they're so good at what they do. But if something goes wrong, they lose a game they expected to win, they miss a shot they expected to go into the basket, or whatever the sport may be, something happens that they're not used to happening in many cases. And rather than seeing that as a learning experience, well, next time I'll do this, or glad that happened because I learned about this. Instead, they start really beating themselves up. And that conscious mind starts talking about, how could you do that? That was such a stupid mistake. How could you? And we start hearing those voices. That doesn't serve us at all. So the word that I find they most often use is spiral. That once that starts, they get caught in a spiral and they spiral down. And the deeper down they go, the darker and meaner it gets. And consequently, that then affects their performance. They go out there with those doubts and those concerns and self-sabotaging messages that their conscious mind has given them. And I help them identify that when it starts and learn how to stop it and shift it.
I love that. And I think what I've seen in high performing individuals is that depth of the darkness is significantly deeper than, it's what drives them to be the best in the first place, is trying to get away from that darkness. Is that fair?
Well, I think it is. A parent comes to mind right now who, and it's often the parent. If it is an athlete who's in high school or college, it's often the parent that makes the connection. And I remember one saying, my son is doing so well academically, athletically, tells me more about his peak performance. He said, but he's not enjoying himself. He is carrying this heavy, heavy weight of responsibility. He is so burdened. He said, I want him to experience and enjoy his last year in college, and he's not in his current frame of mind. So that can be an example also. And that's where that darkness can set in, that not only did he feel responsible for his own performance, but being the captain of his sports team, he felt responsible for his teammates too, which I admire, when they feel very that their leadership role is important, that's so much to their benefit and says a lot about the rest of their life when they take that role so seriously.
I love that. And I think that's in business. I think a lot of people don't recognize one of the big things I see with our visionary entrepreneurs is they think they're alone because they can't talk to, they don't have a peer that they can talk to. And I think they don't recognize, we're the last to see when we're spiraling. Is that fair?
I think so. And that's really our first step. I guess the first step is helping people understand that they do have two separate minds. They've got a conscious mind, a subconscious mind. That surprises some people. They really, I have two minds. So that's really the first step, is to be sure that that is understood, and that conscious mind is the one that barks at us all the time and can argue with us and challenge us and say negative things. The subconscious mind, on the other hand, is the most creative, the most powerful instrument in the universe. And when people realize that, and the fact that they have control of that mind, that can be a life changer. Absolutely. So we want to help them learn how to catch that conscious mind, quiet it. They don't have to fight it. In fact, I move away from fighting things, but just to quiet it and say, I don't need you right now. And then to access the subconscious mind and how powerful it can be in supporting someone in whatever they're seeking. If it's to escape that darkness, if it's to play a little bit better, if it, however it's manifesting in their life at the moment.
I love that. Now, you mentioned before we hit record, and I think this is important to draw out, a lot of what our subconscious mind believes to be so was formed in early life when we perhaps weren't well equipped to consciously make these decisions. So how does childhood affect adulthood with the subconscious?
Boy, it really can. I'm not going to say that it plays into every situation, but many it does. And I think I mentioned to you briefly working with someone who was in their 60s and had a behavior that he said, I've had this all my life. Now that I'm older, it's a real concern, and I got to figure out why do I do this, and how can I change it? And we discovered very quickly, by the way, this doesn't take months, years, weeks of therapy and exploring and so on. We could do it very quickly. But he discovered a belief that he formed as a toddler, truly. And we always hope the client will see what's going on, and we don't have to play that big of a role. It's always more important when they get it. And he did. He said, that's crazy. I don't need to believe that anymore. I've believed that all my life, and it's ridiculous. And when you have that kind of realization, it actually can be changed immediately. If somebody, now someone else might look at it and say, well, that's interesting. I have to think about that. Well, no, you really don't have to. If you want it, you can give it some thought as to whether or not you want to change it. But if you don't want to think that anymore, you can change that immediately. Again, you don't have to tear it apart or, spend hours talking about it. We can change beliefs very, very quickly. And that can be a game changer, if you will.
Well, and I think, so for your benefit, because we didn't talk about this, I've gone through and I spent about 50 years of my life believing that this was in charge. And the day I realized it wasn't, I was like, oh. But for me, it was freeing because I realized if I'm the source of all of the problems in my life, I'm also the fix, the cure for it. And it's fascinating because when you have conflict, it's because your rational conscious brain is trying to stifle your subconscious. And I think that's a fascinating space to play in, because once you get out of the way, it's like channeling this supercomputer that It's a wonderful thing, but it's very obedient, and it gives you exactly what you tell it you want. Even when you say, I want to be wealthy, you say to it, I'm lacking wealth. It's a very literal. I'm fascinated by how brilliant and literal and annoying it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. The subconscious mind, unlike the conscious mind, the subconscious mind does not question us. It doesn't second guess us. It doesn't fight us. If we can view it as it just kind of sitting in the wings, waiting, what do you need? How can I help you? And everybody has access to that. It does require quieting the conscious mind. And I like to help people learn to do that very quickly. You don't have to go into, I do work with hypnosis, and I help people understand how valuable hypnosis is because it quiets the conscious mind and it accesses the subconscious mind and can help make those kind of changes. And in fact, I've started using a different term because I think it makes more sense to people, but it's dynamic guided visualization. And and I think it helps to be guided. We can learn to do it on our own. But I think at least initially, and maybe off and on throughout life, it really helps to have somebody else guiding that, because you can truly give in to total relaxation and release that anxiety when you kind of let it go into somebody else's hands briefly.
I love that. And I think one of my little pet peeves with traditional talk therapy is I'm up here trying to explain how I felt about it. I'm not getting to the root of it because I'm rationalizing, I'm telling the story. The subconscious doesn't really understand the language of positive and negative. I'm going to share a story I heard on the radio this morning. I'm not kidding. I cringed. Somebody called in and said, I'm the most unlucky person on the planet. If it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have any. And I wish it would stop. And I just went, oh my God, you just told your brain.
Yes, exactly.
I can't
Exactly.
make this stuff up.
I know. But some people just don't get that. And I don't know, maybe it took a long time for us to get it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure. But when you talk about that, I've over the years gotten so that I incorporate solution-focused coaching and the hypnosis or the guided visualization. And people ask me, well, what do you mean solution-focused coaching? And I just say, well, we don't spend a lot of time talking about the problem because you know the problem and you probably think about it. And like you mentioned, talk about it every day. So we don't need to spend any time on that. What we really want to do is focus on the solution. What is the solution? If we have to spend a little bit of time figuring out where did it come from, like the guy I was talking about, and get rid of that, so be it. But then let's move on to the solution. What are the steps that you can be taking mentally and physically in your life? So yeah, it's a little bit different approach to life, certainly different from the person you heard this morning. I know I just cringe when I hear things like that. And people say, well, so many people are, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but so many people, it's like they're defined by a condition. Maybe it's a medical condition or I hear a lot of people ADHD and different things like that. Well, I have ADHD, so, and I just, I guess what it comes down to is I like to encourage people, don't take ownership of something like that. Maybe you receive a diagnosis. You don't have to take it on. It doesn't have to become your identity. And you can, I think often if it's a medical condition, we can heal faster from it when we don't take ownership of it and we don't, fight it and have a war with it. And that just gives it more energy, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think that's a lot of people want to fight it. For what it's worth, I'm autistic and have ADHD. Neither one of those defines me, but it gives me certain perspectives that I cherish, and I can't imagine not having either, because I'd feel so lonely in my head without all of the conversations.
Well, you have obviously learned exactly how to approach that and make it a very livable situation. But so many people don't. They stop at, well, I have this. And that becomes, I remember this little phrase comes to me right now that somebody said, a reason is just an excuse dressed up in better clothes.
Exactly.
And I think I think that's what we do sometimes. Well, if I have this, then that explains everything about me. And so
it's like, oh, I can stop trying. And, I'm fascinated by Jung's work, because he talks about there's people who stay stuck in the victim. So, woe is me, I have ADHD. Then you get people who get stuck in the warrior state where I have ADHD. You got a problem with that. And then you get to this point, I think he calls it the sage, where it's, I have ADHD and here's how it shows up. But it's also more, you're observing it rather than judging it. And it can be a superpower.
Yeah, if you choose to see it, it's how you choose to see it. It's your perception. And sometimes that really is what needs to change, is how someone perceives something, especially if the situation that's concerning them involves another person. I'm sorry, we can't do anything about that other person. We have absolutely no control. And, there are times that I have people say, well, if so-and-so didn't do this, then I wouldn't have this problem. Well, we've got some work right there that we need to straighten out before we can move forward. But that's hard for some people to accept.
Well, and for me, it was the understanding that I am the root cause of all my problems, because I choose how I react. I choose the beliefs I have. It's very freeing all of a sudden, because no, everybody is not out to get me. No, everybody is not annoying. I'm just choosing to be annoyed in this moment, or choosing to feel persecuted. I can choose to not feel that way too. And that's
Sure.
a powerful thing.
Sure. Yeah. No, I had somebody say something to me, I don't know, a week ago or so. And it was just a little off-putting to me personally. And the thing is, though, I found that the next day I was thinking about it again. And I guess that's the key, is the awareness. I thought, I don't need to spend time thinking about that. I can't go back and have that person not say that.
Yep.
But I certainly do not need to, first of all, take it on, own it in any way. And just, I absolutely can let it go. Change my perception about it.
Well, and it's freeing to know that we have that choice. And,
Right.
I'm fascinated because a friend of mine, he talks about the conscious brain as a time machine, because it can go back into our past and remember terrible things. It can go forward and imagine terrible things. But he said the subconscious sits right in the present because it doesn't understand time.
I guess I'm going to take a little bit of issue with that, and maybe it's just verbiage, but I believe that our subconscious mind holds all the information that we have. And it's our conscious mind that will sometimes block it from coming up. What comes to my mind right now is someone taking a very critical exam, say the LSATs and MCAT, that kind of thing. And, there are real strong limitations or requirements around those tests. And if you don't pass them right away, you can only take them so many times within a span of time, so on and so forth. I have worked with people facing those exams, and it's their last try for another year or 2 year, whatever the arrangement.
The pressure's high.
Exactly. And by then, they're so paranoid, they are so tense that they don't know the information, that they're not going to have access to the information when they take the test. And when I help them understand, you know, all that information, it's all there.
Yeah.
It's simply sitting in your conscious or your subconscious mind, waiting to be brought to the surface right when you need it.
Yeah.
And we do a few sessions where we teach the subconscious mind to open up all that information. The person has spent hours and hours studying, and to presume that they don't know those facts, of course they do. And we just need to, again, quiet the conscious mind and, just sit off to the side for a while. And the conscious mind is going to come up, be with me taking this exam. When I see a question, the subconscious mind is going to present the answer to me right when I need it. And you get that belief installed in your mind, and you absolutely can pass that test.
It's funny because I'm thinking of some people I've known in my life that were perfectionists. And I feel like perfectionism is a really loud instance of the conscious mind. It probably goes back to childhood. Some, you're not good enough. Oh yeah, you want to bet. And that belief comes through. I've struggled with perfectionism in my past life. I've overcome it by accepting it and saying, thank you, you're welcome here. So this might sound a little weird to you, Karen, but a friend of mine talks about the conscious brain as a group of monkeys in our head chattering away.
Absolutely.
And he talks about the subconscious is an elephant. And so when the subconscious is regulated and the monkeys are calm, we go along exactly as we intended. But then the monkeys start fighting and the elephants overcorrecting. Next thing you know, we're burning down our business because something got dysregulated.
That's a great illustration. I got to work with that a little bit more. I love that. And one of the images when you talked about the elephant is the size of the elephant and the retention. An elephant never forgets.
Yep.
Yeah. So all that information is stored in that big, robust presence. And we can access it when we need it.
And he's the one who talks about time sort of disappearing, but it's not that it disappears, it's that it's infinite. So it's like that movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
Yeah.
It's this infinity, whereas it's the conscious brain that sits and watches a clock going 5 more minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
yeah.
We can process the things that don't really matter in such great detail, yet we lose track of what the elephant's doing. And it's funny because I've developed, he calls it the observer, but it's when you get into a state where you can observe the monkeys without reacting to them.
Exactly.
And you can build that bandwidth to observe the elephant. And it's a fascinating, I think in a lot of the literature, they call it that flow state. That is like the greatest state to be in because everything just moves and there's no concept of time per se.
Yeah, absolutely. And oh gosh, I had what you were talking about. I had a great example of that happening, and I lost it. I got so focused on what you were saying, but I think it was. Oh, I know what it was. One of the differences with the subconscious mind is that it's not that monkey mind. It's not that group of monkeys. It doesn't bug us. It just sits there waiting. Yeah. And when we just trust, that's another big factor. We just trust that that's happening. And it's easier then to quiet the monkey mind or those monkeys that are just, let them go off in a corner and have fun by themselves, But there's an element of letting go, of giving in and releasing. And I like to use the word effortless, and that could be in conscious performance. I use that a lot with
Yeah.
athletes or people who are presenting or preparing to perform in some way, that it's who you are, and
Yeah.
just know that, accept it, and then your performance can be more effortless.
Yeah.
So there are so many different ways to approach that, but it can make. I had one young man I was working with who was a runner, and he would get, let's say he was going to run a 2-mile race, and he'd get to the first mile and he'd be fine and running. And he was a very fast runner. I mean, he was known to compete, and but he would get to that second mile, and he said, I could start to feel my legs tense up. My legs would get tired, and I would think, I don't think I can make it. I don't think I can run another mile. So he did have a physical reaction, if you will, but then he allowed the subconscious or the conscious mind to tell him, well, if your legs are tired, you might not be able to run that second mile. And we worked to the point where he saw his running as being more effortless. And when he reached that second mile, he could actually visualize himself just coming up from the ground. And his legs just felt like air, like they were moving in the air. And it was just so effortless to run that second mile. Made a huge difference in his time and his competition. And so that
I love
can
I
really
love
help.
that, because I think a lot of people talk themselves, they get to the point where they talk themselves out of trying because the effort of trying and the fear of failure is greater than the joy of potential success.
Sure. And that's where effortlessness comes in.
Yeah.
Just believing, I know I can do this, so I don't need to struggle about it. That's who I am. I'm a great runner.
Well, the funny thing, Karen, that came to me. So first of all, I looked everywhere for inner peace, and then one day I found it, and I went, "Oh crap! It was here."
Funny how that happens.
I
Yeah.
just sat and laughed at myself. I was like, "Oh my god!" I was looking for it, and it was right here.
Yeah.
But the big aha for me was that my conscious brain, in its finite vision, thought this is what success looks like, and it had this very narrow definition. And then when I got out of the way and let the subconscious flow through, I was like, wow, that was such a limiting belief that, even though I believed in abundance, I was still limiting what abundance looked like. And I was like, wow, that's going to break your brain for a while. So
Well, it sounds like you certainly came to the right realization that has served you and serves you very well. That's wonderful.
well, it's one of those strange things that at some point I realized that the shadows, the places that I feared, were just parts of me from my childhood that other people had criticized. And so those you lock in the little shame cupboard and say, don't go near there. Now that I've integrated it, it's like there is no, a lot of people talk about childhood trauma. I just see childhood feedback, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. No, I had an experience. I was very active in music all through grade school and high school. And I was the student musical director in high school. And we had a very progressive musical leader. We did big shows each year. And I was a pianist. And I would accompany everything for all of the shows that we did. But we would also compete every year in a statewide musical competition. And we'd travel to one of the universities which hosted this. And each year I would get first place for anything I did, whether it was with one of the groups or playing the piano or whatever. My senior year, I sat down to play my number and I could not remember a note. I had never had that experience. The audience was so big, I didn't want to make a fool of myself. of course, my main concern was the judges panel, but I didn't want to just sit there and not do anything. So I just kind of made up something. I was playing something. And in most cases, only the judges knew, what is she playing? She's certainly not playing the number. That had a huge impact on me because I formed a belief that day, you can no longer memorize music. There's no way you can play music without having it in front of you ever again. And I believed that for a very, very long time. And I have to say, I haven't been in that same kind of situation to test it, but I certainly became aware of changing that belief that day. And it changed how I viewed performing. And up till then, I had felt very comfortable as a pianist in whatever situation. And it changed that day. So I really had to work on that. And it was later that I had to work on it, to really recognize it. So, yeah.
See, I think childhood just gives us things to work on later in life.
I guess. Just to keep us busy, huh?
And it's funny because you talked about effortless, and I know it's not a word, but in that moment, music became effortful for you.
Absolutely. And when I was able to look back and say, well, boy, it was a good thing you could improvise like you did. Like just sit there and play something. And so, I have to believe that was my subconscious mind coming forward with some information I wasn't even aware was in there. Those notes. So, yeah.
And it's an interesting metaphor for life because you were concerned about this big audience. They didn't know what was going on. And just that small panel of judges were like, what's she doing? But we naturally look at the big audience and freeze. Sometimes, not always, but now you and I could talk about this all day because we've just touched the tip of that iceberg. If somebody wants to work with you or get to know you, what's a good place? I know you're active on LinkedIn. Where can they go to find out more about working with you as their mindset person?
Sure. And I'll just say that I'm always eager to have, of course, a complimentary conversation. I may not be the right person for everybody, but I certainly am for many. And just sending me an email directly is a perfect way to make contact. Just say, I saw you on Jeff's podcast, and you can email me at info@KarenRossNow.com. And that's my website, KarenRossNow.com. If you go to my website, you'll have more than enough opportunities to schedule on my calendar. You probably don't need that many, but it'll give you every chance to schedule here. So you can go directly to the website or just email me directly.
And by the way, for the audience out there, that's something, it should be easy to book and do the next step. So Karen, I want to thank you for hanging out with me and for sharing your brilliance with my audience.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you having me on. Glad that we reconnected after a while. And it's my honor to have been here. I thank you for this opportunity.